Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the GeekWave. This is the low-budget show. It's the show so low it has no budget. We have a big episode to get into. There's a lot to unpack with the filmmaker and just creative we are talking about today. This is the David Lynch episode. I was hoping it wouldn't come to this quickly into 2025, but we just lost one of the most influential and important voices in American filmmaking, maybe in filmmaking ever. Maybe in somebody who is just artistic. He is so impactful and important, and we're going to dive deep into that. David Lynch passed away a couple days ago at the age of 78, and it sucks. There is some cause saying it might be because of his years of smoking, and it was emphysema that he had, something to that effect, and being caught up in LA during the fires could have affected his breathing. And it just was, the perfect concoction of everything coming together to affect his ability to continue. It sucks. It really sucks. We're going to get into it. I have a little bit of news we're going to cover. It's some interesting stuff. It's all important and interesting to explore. Some casting announcements, some, filmmakers making huge deals, and, a glimpse at a new movie. So I think we're just going to jump right into that. And then we're going to unpack the world of David Lynch and everything that he's been a part of and he's done. So there will be a time code. If you just want to skip to the David Lynch talk, I understand. We're just going to talk about a little bit of the news that's coming out this week or the past couple of weeks. Not everything, just kind of stuff I think is kind of interesting to look at. So the first thing is Colman Domingo is going to play the announcer in the Running Man movie. We're doing a new Running Man. It's Edgar Wright. It's Glenn Powell. Still coming out this year, which is very interesting. We haven't seen anything from it yet. I think it's November time they're shooting for. I don't know how this is going to go. I am on the Glenn Powell train. I think he's proven last year he's a commodity that people like. I'm going to be very curious to see if he can pull off becoming this generation's movie star. He might get there. It does feel like he's getting to that level, but we'll have to see if he can maintain that for a while. But Colman Domingo, I love him. I think he's fantastic. I can't wait to see where he's going to go in his career, and this is a fun choice for him. He's also voicing Norman Osborn soon. Maybe we just make him the live-action Norman Osborn. That's not a bad idea, if you ask me. But we'll see. From there, we also got our first look at a new movie, Until Dawn. So the video game franchise that I think a lot of people remembered enjoying. It was a couple years ago now, right? When did that first come out? 2015 era. It was in that perfect era of YouTube where everyone was playing the game, but everyone had a different outcome. Well, it's getting a movie now. So, it looks fine. It's David Sandberg, who did the Shazam movies, and I like him. He started off in horror. I think this is a really good leap for him to rebuild himself up from the fiasco that was those movies. So let's see what you got. I'm not sure who's the cast is. I don't really recognize any of these faces, but I guess that's a good thing. That way we won't be able to predict who survives, and that's kind of important. Peter Stormare is returning to do his character. I know he was integral to the game. He was the guy that set everything in motion. I can't remember the game for the life of me, but he's back. So if you like the game, these are new characters, but it's the same premise. Did we get a look at the Wendigos? I can't remember, honestly. This game just it never worked for me. I was yeah, this is something people are gonna like. But we got a bunch of characters here that could die, so that's fun. I think it's gonna be okay. I think this could be a sleeper hit in terms of just low budgety horror that people associate with. It could do Five Nights at Freddy's numbers, or it could do just your typical Blumhouse numbers. I don't think this is Blumhouse though. Who is this? Who's putting this out? Does it say? I'm trying to look here. Just looking at Google. What are we doing, Google? Who's putting this movie out? It's PlayStation Studios. Really? Okay, Sony. Well, yeah, Sony makes sense, I guess. All right. Yeah, they do okay. They do some okay stuff sometimes. Do I recognize any of these kids? No. They're all new, which is good. Who do we think is going to survive? Probably the girl that's Ella Rubin playing Clover. She's probably the main character, I'm going to assume. Very exciting. So April of this year, we're going to be seeing that. Curious to see how that's going to go. Also curious to see how this next piece of news is going to go. This was kind of like buried in an article that people just kind of like picked up on recently. Sebastian Stan is reportedly developing an adaptation of the Image comic book Reckless. Now, we know that Brubaker and Sean Phillips have been working hard on developing Criminal over at Amazon. Like, they are doing that. We are getting that Criminal TV show coming out this year with Emilia Clarke and Charlie Hunnam, and I think there's a couple other names attached to it too. They're doing that. Like, they're making Criminal. And I guess, like, if that is successful, you would want to continue doing stuff with that. Like Brubaker and Phillips, they are a match made in heaven in terms of like the specific comic book stuff they are making. And Reckless is just like built for that world. Like, it is such an easy story to adapt because it's not too flashy. It's like a little over the top and zany, but it's a character that is just like a guy dealing with stuff. And Stan is so good at that. He's kind of becoming one of those guys that quietly gets your projects off the ground. He's getting his awards recognition. He's getting his just desserts for it too. So if like the success train of Brubaker and Phillips making like their Criminal series over on Prime, if that's working, I feel like we're going to have something going on really good here. This article is from Bleeding Cool, so I don't know how accurate it is to, information that's going on. Sex, drugs, and murder in 1980s Los Angeles, and the best new twist on paperback Paul Pierro since The Punisher or Jack Reacher. Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips, the modern masters of crime noir, bring us the last thing anyone expected from them. A good guy, a bold new series of original graphic novels of 3 books releasing over the next year, each a full-length story that stands on its own. Meet Ethan Reckless. Your trouble is his business for the right price, but when a fugitive, I wouldn't have, grammarly put it that way. Your business is his business. Your trouble is his business for the right price. But when a fugitive from the radical student from his radical student days reaches out for help, Ethan must face the only thing he fears, his own past. There is a director attached in Christian Mongeau. So that's fun. Like, I like that. I really like that idea. Stan's a cool guy. I hope he gets this made. So, I'm always down. I'm always down for stuff like this. There are so many of like those Brubaker and Phillip books that they could adapt. So I am here to see what that's going to look like. I'm hoping it's good. We'll see what happens. So our next piece of news, though, is something that's kind of been talked about before. We know that Greta Gerwig's next film is going to be an adaptation of the Chronicles of Narnia. In some capacity, she's working on a Narnia movie. It is for Netflix, so that sucks. That really sucks. I hate that. I'm pretty sure I've made my stance clear on a lot of things. I hate Netflix more than almost anything else in this world. It's garbage and it's trash, and I hate everything they do. But Greta Gerwig is so fucking successful that she got Imax and Netflix to strike a deal so her Narnia movie coming out next year in 2026 can get released on IMAX screens, at least 1,000 IMAX screens, and it's possible it could go up to 1,800 depending on how it does internationally. So it would be streaming there for 2 to 3 weeks on IMAX screens. Depending on IMAX's desire to extend the run, this means that we could be seeing Netflix actually getting movies in theaters, which they should do. Holy shit. I hate it. I hate that Netflix sucks so much. But this is what you should be doing. Who's going to watch it? Like, are you kidding me? A Narnia movie just coming out onto streaming? Who gives a shit? Put that in theaters. Make your money. Greta Gerwig is a name that people like. Why is she making a Narnia movie, though? I don't understand that. Who wants a Narnia movie? I'm so glad she was able to, like, talk Ted Sarandos into this stupid deal. I hate everything about this. I hate that this had to happen. It really bothers me that this had to happen. But I guess that's the nature of the beast, isn't it? Nothing good ever happens. So, like, Thanksgiving time 2026, you can see a Chronicles of Narnia movie from Greta Gerwig in theaters. Or if you just wait until Christmas of 2026, you can just watch it on Netflix, which is the worst thing I've ever heard. Who wants to wait to watch it on Netflix? So stupid. So stupid. Okay, we got one more piece of news. This is kind of new. Following up on the last piece of news we talked about a week prior, which was Jason Momoa being cast as Lobo, we got some more casting announcements for Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, and that is the people that are going to be playing Supergirl's parents. That's right, folks. We got some casting for, what are their, Zor-El and somebody else. Why am I blanking on the name of the her mom? Whatever. Doesn't matter. Who will be playing the parents of Millie Alcock's Supergirl? It's David Krumholtz and Emily Beecham. That's pretty fun. I like that. Two cool people. Two cool people that could have other roles in this universe, but doing something here over there, I'm happy with it. They're cool. They're hot. They're fun. They're awesome. I like it. I'm happy with this. Very happy with this. Hopefully, I think this is going to do good. I do. I think this movie is just going to quietly find its audience, just be successful. I hope so. I really want this to succeed. Not as much as like Superman, but it's probably on like the same level. Yeah, they're so cool. I don't know. Okay. Let's hope this works. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to jump into the world of David Lynch. David Lynch. I don't even know where to begin with talking about David Lynch. Like, there have been better podcasts than mine that have delved into his entire filmography and his career. And I don't know what we're doing here. I don't know. He is such an influential guy. And he is so important to so many things in like film and creation and just like positive energy. It's very interesting. I'll say this. I got a couple of like, there's so much I want to talk about. I got a couple of points I want to make. First thing I want to say is I have never been like the biggest David Lynch fan in terms of his filmography. Like, they do things and they explore themes that I very much enjoy and I think are important and impactful and have stuff to say. And at the same time, I'm a young guy and I just wasn't part of the generation that grew up with the idolization. I'm the generation that saw the people that grew up with him making their movies that are similar to his. Now, that doesn't mean I don't think they're good. Like, I don't think he's made an absolutely bad film, ever. I think he is such an interesting filmmaker who has made some very compelling stuff, and I really enjoy it. More so than I love it, and that's the thing that I think is very crucial about David Lynch. Sometimes it's not about understanding, it's about the feeling it gives you. And that's like one of the key things about him as just an artist. You don't have to completely understand what you're doing as long as you have the experience of creativity and you are putting something out there. And in that way, while he's not a filmmaker that I've like worshipped when I was younger, I'm like, I gotta make a David Lynch film, I gotta like study his work. He is the type of creator, the type of artist, the type of inventor I want to be, because it's all about the work for him. He was somebody who just had so much creativity in his brain, so much ideas in his brain, something as like short as a short film, something just like sitting in front of a camera and reading off the weather, just ideas in his brain about what you have to do. You have to do something creative. You have to think about something. He did music. He was a painter. He was somebody who just constantly had his things going on and working on and being a part of stuff. Maybe to the detriment of like relationships in his life. But sometimes that's the sacrifice when you are somebody who is just built with that brain. it hurts you more to not talk about stuff than it does to talk about it. I idolize that style of creation and that artistry. It's not about the accolades. It's not about the acknowledgement. It's about there's something fundamentally broken and inherent in my brain that if I don't do this thing, if I can't put something on this canvas and paint it, if I can't make this movie, then I am not doing what I'm put on this earth to do. He was also just such an interesting guy who had so many like personality quirks, and that could be annoying sometimes. Like, he smoked his whole life, and he just had a very specific way of talking and behaving and seeing himself, and I think that's just really interesting. Like, this type of guy existing and looking at the world through a very specific lens. And that I think is like one of the things that can get lost in David Lynch's work is people looking at him and thinking he's a cynic, but he's not really cynical. He is just vastly aware of like the underbelly of society and like the way we hide ourselves and lie about ourselves just to make things look perfect. It's kind of, and this might be an apt comparison, I don't know, it kind of has like that Tim Burton feel of like, I am uncomfortable with how we look at Americana, but I also think it's really important and something to like. But he's also afraid of it, and he has so many feelings that they're just like random things. Like, they're just like ideas he has. It's really cool. I really like him, okay? I think he's such an important filmmaker. Because he's saying things that I think a lot of people were feeling. Especially of a very specific time where he just said, this is weird. Like, being a dad is weird. Being like a child is weird. Living here in this random town is weird. But also, I just like a good cup of coffee and a slice of pie. I just like the idea that we could go to work and do our job and everything, though it's bad sometimes, there's just meaning to it. But also, maybe God hates us and like the things that we fear, we should like meditate against and find our inner peace. He's one of those guys that's like so into meditation and just like understanding the universe that you just kind of like get lost in what he's capable of. But he also has that classic old curmudgeon guy voice. So when he appears in The Fabelmans, or he's on like, what was it, the Cleveland show for so long that he just shows up in? You're like, this guy just shows up and says stuff, and it works so well. So we're going to look at his filmography. We're going to look at his television, because he is influential in both mediums, and we'll look at some of his other stuff too. You know, he did a lot of music videos as well. Worked with 9 Inch Nails a couple of times. They were also in like Twin Peaks and stuff. But he was just a guy that like made things and did stuff. He was also a musician, so he made his own music. You can listen to some of it. I don't know. He was just so aware of what he was doing. And he has acted in a couple of things aside from like his own projects. Like, he was in Twin Peaks, of course, and, you know, he shows up, like I said, The Fabelmans, and there's a couple other things here and there that he does. He's a really interesting guy. Man, he's cool. I don't know how to say it. He's just really interesting and has made some very interesting stuff. They're just, like, we talk about this all the time. You're never going to have a guy like this again, you know? Because the people that could become like him, and I think a key one I'm thinking of now, just in terms of like everything the world is, like Jane Schoenbrunn. She is clearly inspired by Lynch. Like, that is so obvious. But they're never going to be like the next David Lynch because of the era they grew up in, and having grown up on David Lynch just means you can never like be him. You could be him of the time, but there's no one that could do this, because what he was doing throughout the 80s and 90s was just looking back on his own life and being, yeah, there's some things happening here. And that's kind of interesting. You gotta respect it. Like, he was just fully aware of how weird it is to do stuff. And every story you hear about him is like, I'm an insane guy. I'm very specific and picky. Don't bug me about stuff or I'll get mad. And sometimes that can be annoying, and I completely understand that, but you hear all like the kind words everyone says about him. That's good to know. So we'll start with the television. Should we? Nah, we'll start with the movies just because I think we'll go through them back and forth because there's like a clear divide in his career where he like starts off as just like some guy. Because when your first movie's Eraserhead from 1977, you're talking about one of the most surreal, crazy experiments put to film. A guy losing his mind with a weird baby. There's nothing else like it. And in the 70s, when we're doing like this indie movement where people are just making the movies about stuff and it feels different, this low budget, crazy, technical shit. And Lynch is doing so much for the movie. He's doing a lot of like the in-house effects. He's doing a lot of the editing. You're making like this weird story about yourself. And like he was a young father at the time, so there was just so much confusion and fear creeping up. So it becomes like this insane movie that nobody can really understand. But the right people take notice to it. People are like, there is vision and ideas in here that is just hard to explain and explore, but we trust this guy as a filmmaker, and that gets him to The Elephant Man, which is like insane. I love this movie. I don't know if it's my favorite David Lynch movie. That would be hard to say, but this is one of those movies where I just remember going, oh, so this is special. It's very quiet, very depressing, and very sure of how terrifying this topic is to cover. It handles it with such brevity and earnestness. Lynch really knows what he is doing here. John Hurt is phenomenal in this movie. Anthony Hopkins is really good too. It's just quietly brilliant. And you're like, well, it's not as like bombastic and insane as like Eraserhead, but you see like how you go from here's my crazy independent movie where I'm doing all the stuff myself. We're shooting it over like a year. It's insane. Everything's crazy. To, oh, now they're giving me real money. I'm going to turn it back a little bit and just give people a nice, simple film. You understand how that works. And The Elephant Man, it's just so specific. God, it's just really cool. Not a bad movie in the bunch, honestly. They're all so interesting. From Elephant Man, we go to Dune, which is his biggest flop. This is like the movie that could like have easily broken him, where there was like some hope of a young auteur finding his way in this field. You make Dune. Before Denis Villeneuve does anything, this was our Dune for a while. And I remember watching this movie. This was one... My mom loves this movie. She talks about it all the time. I love this movie too. I think it's bizarre and silly and has so much like dumb energy going for it, like weird effects. And how do you condense that story into a movie? It's almost inadaptable at this point in the 80s. How do you adapt this? This is not how you do it, but it's kind of impressive. This also gives us one of the most important figures in the career of David Lynch, and that is Kyle MacLachlan. And we could probably do a whole episode talking about Kyle MacLachlan's career, but Lynch finds him for this movie. He's a malleable little guy that he can just like morph into his stuff, and like as it progresses, MacLachlan becomes like one of his guys that he can turn into the David Lynch caricature. Like, this is the guy I'm putting myself in. And that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So Dune doesn't work. It's a mess. It's big. It's weird. This guy has maybe lost it. But then a couple years later, David Lynch says, give me a little bit of money and I'll make a really good movie called Blue Velvet. I can't do a Lynch voice, but I can kind of do like the cadence in which he talks, which is kind of like this. He talks with a purpose and a specificity. Lynch would never make that mistake in talking about a word. He would never let you know he had something stupid. Blue Velvet is a good movie where Kyle MacLachlan's a pervert. Everyone's a pervert. Dennis Hopper is a pervert. A young Laura Dern who becomes like his female person for a bit. Her and Naomi Watts, like, it's good. It's good. Blue Velvet's a good movie, folks. This is kind of like his really talking about, before we get to like the big stuff with like Wild at Heart and Twin Peaks. What is going on behind the closed doors? There is stuff there that we should talk about, but we don't want to experience or say aloud. And I'm going to shine a light on that. It's pervy, it's creepy, it's dark, but it's also hopeful. It's good, man. I don't know what to tell you. Like, Blue Velvet is just a wonderful little movie that it looks gorgeous and becomes the thing that he's going to do for a lot of his career, which is just shoot really cool people in cool ways and have our actors go crazy. He's such an actor's director, you know? Like, he just is like, I trust you, but let me tell you, I know what I'm doing as well, so we can work together and everything will be okay. It's kind of amazing. Really good stuff. Wild at Heart, the one with Nicolas Cage and Laura Dern. This isn't my favorite of his work, but it's really fun. It's a silly comedy. There's some really good music in it, some really good colors. Like, it is, you're like, this guy just knows what he's doing. He's making these weird movies. He's having so much fun. I'm going to like start getting a little more like ethereal with my work. It's going to look crazier and more silly, just over the top. You love it. You love to see it. Like, all these movies I'm talking about, I think they're all good. And I think part of like my understanding of them, or like why they've never spoken to me personally, I think part of it is because I've watched them all so young. I was very young when I watched a lot of this stuff. And by young, I mean like 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, like that. And, you know, that's more than 10 years ago for me now. If I were to go, and I haven't rewatched a lot of it, but if I were to go back and watch a lot of these now, I feel like they would just hit me harder. Maybe because the person I idolize now in David Lynch is not who I idolized back then. But I just remember watching Wild at Heart and thinking, this is really cool. It's not like working for me every time, but it's really cool. The Elephant Man and Blue Velvet still really work for me. They're two really good movies. Now, from here, there's a huge shift that happens in David Lynch's career. And we're going to talk about that instead of just going through all the movies again. We have a 2-season television show that comes out in 1990, and it's called Twin Peaks. Now, David Lynch didn't direct every episode. He didn't write every episode, but he was the creator, and he was the producer. And it's important to note that this is the show that kind of changed the game. This, like, we could do an entire episode on Twin Peaks, and I haven't had a chance to go back and rewatch all of Twin Peaks. It's not a show that like I've said with all of David Lynch, it's not something I go back and do all the time. But I remember when I was like, I think I was 15 or 16, I was like, it's time to watch Twin Peaks. And I watched it. I watched the first season and I went, okay, I get what we're doing here. This is interesting to look at. It's a interesting concept. A lot of it kind of like just went over me because I'm a young kid. I'm not 100% like engrossed in everything going on. I don't think I finished all of season 2, and then I did watch The Return when it came out. I was a little bit older then. It was just working a little bit better. This show is the predecessor to so many things that happen in television. The weekly idea of like, we have to watch it and see what's coming up next. The overarching story themes of where we're going, what's happening here. The maturity of television, kind of like before television becomes like the main thing. Because this wasn't like, you know, it was, how do you explain this to people? It's so hard to explain. It was network television. It wasn't on cable. Like it was like an HBO or like a Homicide on the Streets thing. This was like just regularly scheduled programming on television. And it was dealing with these mature themes of like rape and assault and sexual identity and murder and affairs and stuff. And it was just taking it in like this really extreme way. And it was also kind of like the death of like Americana, and how like, in the same way Blue Velvet's like what's going on behind the closed doors. Like, this town is so like American, and then there's so much greedy and corruption and fear going on everywhere around it. And you have Kyle MacLachlan just showing up trying to be like, how do I figure out what this world is? And he can't. It's heady and ahead of its time. And if it came out, 10 years later, it would probably have gone on forever. And we'd still be like, well, we still talk about it now, but we'd still be like seeing the ramifications of it. They'd still be doing spin-offs and stuff. Like, they'd be trying to do like, remember they did that like Sopranos prequel with like Gandolfini's son? We'd be doing that with Twin Peaks a little bit more. But it was just so unbridled Lynch, just on television, saying stuff, giving you stuff to think about and care about. And that became something crazy, and it lasted 2 seasons. And Lynch was not heavily involved in the second season, but that led him to making Fire Walk with Me, which is just kind of, what happened before the events of the TV show. Is a little bit more of a like Laura Palmer, and we see some other characters get introduced, other things happening. It just turned into like this cult obsessive thing. And I totally think David Lynch had his fans before that. But when you have a television show that doesn't give you every answer right away, it is building its audience on, you have to watch weekly, you have to have your own thoughts and feelings about everything going on. It turns David Lynch into this desirable figure where there is like a cult-obsessed nature to him, where we just study everything he does to figure out what he's saying. Even if he doesn't know everything he's saying, we are studying him and thinking about him and trying to get a better sense of who he is, because we want to talk about his stuff and see what he is capable of. And Twin Peaks starts that. You don't get Lost without Twin Peaks. You don't get Breaking Bad without Twin Peaks. Without like this show laying the foundation for how this can work. You don't get those things. Television used to mean something, man. Like, can you imagine if we made Twin Peaks today and it was just on like Peacock? Or no, I guess it'd be, was it ABC that had this one? So it'd be like Hulu. Oh, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work. My goodness, what a good time. TV used to mean something, man. I don't know. Like, this show is just crazy. We'll talk about The Return in a bit here. Because the thing about The Return is it might be the perfect send-off for David Lynch to, like, creatively. I would have loved to see him try more. But if that's the last thing you ever get to say, good for you. You said something incredible. Twin Peaks is amazing. Fire Walk with Me, Laura Palmer, it's good. I have not seen it. I might have just seen parts of it. Lost Highway is one I have not seen yet, but it is Bill Pullman and Patricia Arquette. Look, I listen to a lot of podcasts. One of the podcasts I just listened to, Blank Check, they just did David Lynch. So I listened to this episode. I'm like, oh shit, this sounds awesome. I gotta see this. Like, what does it mean to be yourself? That's cool. And he's like, I don't know. He tries a couple other TV shows in there that don't really take off. There's On the Air, which is just, it's his weird sitcom where you're like, this is just a sitcom. You're not really doing anything. There's Hotel Room where you're like, this could be something, but it just never went anywhere. He'll come back to TV like 20 years removed from that. So, yeah, Lost Highway, I'm sure it's good. People really like it. The Straight Story is kind of him like actually making a movie that's normal. It's a straight story. A guy on a tractor wants to see his brother. Who is it Richard Farnsworth? Is that it? Yeah, it is Richard Farnsworth. What if you loved something and you had to go deal with it? I don't know what to tell you. Look, it's not a script he wrote. It's more like, I got to get back into making movies the right way. I guess I'll do this project and see where it takes me. Probably a very good strategic move at the time. Don't know if it like saved his career or not, but I think it's pretty fun. If you need something easy to watch, there's worse you could do. Like, old man on a tractor wants to see his brother before he dies. Like, come on, that's cute. That's nice. You like it. And that wraps up David Lynch in the 90s. Then we're going to move over to something impossible to talk about. Now, I am going to do a full episode of the show Movie Tales talking about this next movie because it's one of those films that I've struggled with my whole life. It's called Mulholland Drive. And I really, at this point in my life, post the death of David Lynch, having spent more time analyzing and studying film, this is a movie I really want to come back to. I saw it when I was very young, like too young to fully understand what I'm doing here. I don't think a 14-year-old is going to comprehend this movie. And that's the other thing about this movie. And the whole thing about David Lynch, too, is sometimes it's not about understanding what you're seeing. It's about the feeling, the sensation of what is happening in front of you. And I think that is so important. Some people are like, what does that mean? What is the point of this? The point is you have a reaction. And that is so cool. And Lynch was one of those key components in just feel what's happening here. Feel the wind in your hair. Smell the, fresh pie. Just live in this. Sit here. Digest this. Don't let it wash over you. Just chew on it for a while. You'll understand what's happening. And if you don't, you still tasted something good. You put this in your mouth and you liked it. So Mulholland Drive. I don't know what to say. Just that it might be one of the most important movies of the 21st century. One of the most interesting movies of the 21st century. Perhaps it is the most David Lynch you can get in the modern sense of just, isn't Los Angeles weird? Isn't living near Hollywood a crazy thing to happen? I've been in this industry for 3 decades, and it's a cesspool of weird and annoyance. I don't know what's going on. I can't wait to dive back into this one. I just bought the 4K. The Criterion, actually. Oh, man, it's exciting. It's kind of exciting. God. Mulholland Drive. Naomi Watts, fantastic. Justin Theroux, fantastic. You might not even have seen this film, but you will recognize so many iconic shots from it. That is what this is. That is what this is. And Ann Miller is in this movie. That's the other thing about Lynch, too. Lynch loves famous people. He loves old Hollywood. Isabella Rossellini is in a lot of his stuff. He's like, I love you and I love your mother. You're the closest I can get to your mother. Spend time with me. And then Kyle MacLachlan's just there sometimes. Laura Dern, your dad is weird. I love it. That's Lynch. That is Lynch. That is what he does. That is how he is. He's just one of those guys. He's like, Hollywood, it's crazy here. Dude, it's true. It is crazy here. I say here like I'm in Hollywood. Well, I cannot wait to talk about Mulholland Drive. I don't know how many David Lynch movies we're going to talk about over the next week or month. I for sure want to talk about Mulholland Drive. I think we're going to talk about like Blue Velvet and maybe another one as well. We'll see. But his final feature film comes to us in 2006 in Inland Empire, which is, how do you even describe this movie? It's so loose in what it's doing. It's more like vignettes and shots of just stuff. He's like, I want to film this today. I'm going to film this here. Laura Dern, come here and film this with me. It's crazy. It is crazy. But it's so experimental, and that's the thing too. Like we talked about like other filmmakers, like when we talked about Zemeckis, where it's about the advancement of technology and trying new techniques. Lynch is like, what if I filmed it on terrible film quality and it looked bad on purpose? Wouldn't that be funny? Yeah, kind of. It would be a weird movie, but he made it. You got to commend him for making something insane. Then, look, Lynch was also one of those guys that just went to the internet really fast. He was like, I'm going to make a web series. Here's rabbits. Look at these rabbits. I'm going to talk about the weather. He just knew what he was so like, yeah, the internet, that's where you got to go. I'll burn my own DVD discs and send them out to people. That'll be a good idea for me. He was just so aware of it. He just knew, like, yeah, this is the future. I'm going to do it. Seth MacFarlane, you want me to be in the Cleveland show? Okay, I'll do it. He got it. Like, he did it. And you look at this career, right? Before we get to the final thing he does, that's like a big thing. It's just inventive and experimental and weird. And it just talks about, like, the fringes of society. There's some, like, John Waters in there, too. He's just like, everything is a lie. But I kind of love it. I think we need the illusion in order to be happy. And you got to respect him for that. So many short films. A huge list of short films. He made that one called What Did Jack Do? Where he's like talking to a monkey. It's on Netflix. Made a bunch of stuff. Like, he is good. Always doing something creatively to keep himself busy. And his final major, like, thing that he got to make was for Showtime. They said, here's an unlimited budget, essentially. We want you to join the prestigious television game, David Lynch. Will you bring back Twin Peaks? And he did. And David Lynch, in 2017, makes a little TV show called Twin Peaks: The Return. And boy, oh boy, do we get something incredible from it. We get David Lynch directing 18 episodes of television, and it is crazy. We do not have the time nor dedication to talk about Twin Peaks: The Return in full. There are podcasts dedicated to it. There are reviews from the time it came out that are dedicated to it. It is perhaps the most ambitious thing ever put to, like, television. Yes, it's Showtime, so it's kind of more cable-y, but there is literally nothing like it. There is the hanging thread from earlier Twin Peaks, like, I'll see you again in 25 years. Well, now we can follow up on that. And what happens is something that is ambitious and crazy and goes all over the place and introduces more characters and new characters. We get, like, the majority of, like, the cast returns, even if it's in, like, a bit part. It's like, my son's weird now. Hey, I'm still doing the thing I did before and it's not good. But also, you get an insane episode of television called Part 8, Got a Light, which is, people probably say it's, like, the most impressive, you know, of, like, the whole experiment that is The Return. Part 8 is just, this is pretty normal so far. A normal episode for The Return. Kyle MacLachlan's kind of weird and stuff. And then the atomic bomb creates a portal that unleashes demons onto the world, kind of. And then Nine Inch Nails plays. But, like, that's it. Like, that's this show. It's just, here are things I like and an idea I have. I'm never in my lifetime going to get the money to do this again. So I'm going to wrap up Twin Peaks as best as I can. Here are some answers. Here's some new questions. But you get enough closure. Enough, I say very loosely, but you get closure on certain things. Enough of so where you can just understand where we're going, what we're doing, and see the types of films, the types of stories that David Lynch wants to make. He's not getting the money to do that again. There will never be, in a big studio forum, another Inland Empire, Mulholland Drive, Twin Peaks: The Return, Fire Walk with Me, Blue Velvet. We will never have these movies mean something again on that scale. We will see them kind of happen, and I saw the TV Glow and stuff like that. where there's clearly the homage and inspiration, but we just never have it grow to the strengths that it does. If you haven't seen Twin Peaks: The Return, it is crazy television. It goes all over the place. So many guest stars appear. It is so well handled. And it's almost paced like an 18-hour movie, which would be an insane experiment to see somebody try to attempt. But, God, oh God, what a weird time. Check it out. Like, I think Twin Peaks is all worth watching. There's nothing else like it. It's one of the most insane things to ever happen. And it's crazy. Like, I'm looking right now at, like, the Wikipedia, and it gives you, like, the dates of, like, the amount of people that watch it. 34 million people watched the first episode of Twin Peaks. The numbers kind of, like, stayed in, like, the, 11 to 12 million people. And then by the time we get to The Return, you're doing, like, 250,000 around there. Oh, man, it's rough. But it's good. Has there ever been a creator this ambitious and determined to make something for himself specifically? I gotta commend that. I love David Lynch for that. If that alone, this is a guy who is just, like it or don't, I don't care. I had to make it. And I appreciate that. I respect that. I believe that. What a filmography. What a career. This is like an unprecedented career. You redefined television. You made some of the most experimental films ever that are influencing creators to this day. And you were an early adopter of the internet. Like, you were perfect. You were a perfect guy with weird habits and specificities, but you just understood the assignment when it came to what you had to do creatively. And I appreciate that. The balance between creativity and, just like real life, it's hard sometimes. And I think, we can all say we've blurred the lines here and there. All of us have. But this is something that is special. And he's special. And he made something special. So if I had to say my favorite David Lynch films, I would probably go Elephant Man, Blue Velvet, Mulholland Drive, and I guess The Straight Story is pretty good. But Twin Peaks and Twin Peaks: The Return, beautiful, incredible. One of the best final notes to end a career on that we are ever going to see. Ever. You don't get that many big directors being able to end their career on one of the most impressive and ambitious things to ever be put to television. We won't see it. We rarely do. But we'll see what happens. So, David Lynch, I've struggled with you my whole life. I cannot wait to get to know you better and better again. Thank you for your work. Rest in peace, sir. I am excited to be with you forever. Whatever that looks like. Maybe a floating gas bubble over Hiroshima or something. Thank you all. Oh, man, I don't even know how to end this one. Thank you all for watching this episode. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. As always, you can check me out on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And, of course, I will catch you in the next one. Have fun. Stay safe. Good luck. Keep on. Keep it on, folks.